Hi guys, so workshop clip number 3 for the ranges of motion of the hip. And this is everybody's fan favorite. This is external rotation. This is what you think of usually, right, when you think of a hip opener. Butterfly legs, pigeon legs, sleeping swan, things like that. And it's really easy for those of us who have the range of motion externally. If you don't, it's also something that you probably don't like at all. And it's completely understandable because I don't like camels, so I get it. We all have that pose that we really don't like. So external rotation has a lot to do with the psoas muscle. And even though yin yoga is about connective tissue, that psoas muscle, the iliopsoas, which is the main hip flexor, the deep external rotator of the hip, it can get super tight if you are a runner, if you are a cyclist. It can get very sedentary and almost weak if you sit in front of a computer all day, even if you're driving a car a lot. And so you want to strengthen and stretch it, strengthen and stretch. So a lot of that stuff that we do in hatha, a figure 4 squat, even when we get into our warriors, I'm going to do warrior legs even though I'm sitting down. Our warriors, you're strengthening the psoas muscle. A triangle pose, you're strengthening and stretching at the same time. But our yin poses, remember, we're trying to stretch. And even though we're not trying to stretch muscle, we're trying to lengthen connective tissue. We've got to get past that tightness or weakness sometimes of the psoas muscle. So that's where your butterfly legs come in, your sleeping swan, which is the yin version of pigeon. What I would like you to know, though, is hip openers need to be taken, whether you have the flexibility or not, need to be taken slow. That's why we do this fan favorite again, the windshield wiper the legs. Starting out, maybe you just do a half rather than going so deep that you're taking the pelvis out 2 different ways, just a half butterfly, not folding forward as much. Another way to lengthen that is by doing your extension first. Your extension, remember Sphinx pose from the earlier clip? Do your extension first and get the length in there so that you have the space to open up through the hip. Then maybe you just do a seated or a reclined pigeon. It's without putting the body weight on. It takes some of that pressure off. And then finally, another great idea is the dragon pose, the hated dragon pose. Set up with your dragon pose before you would get into a sleeping swan, let's say. And even though you might not love this pose, it's still less harsh. Not really a word I'd love to use, but less harsh than this deep external rotation of a sleeping swan where you're folding over that hip. So there you have it. There's our external rotation and what it is. That's what the external rotation is. So my homework for you in this clip, because those of you who get the workshop clips, you are in that Patreon 2nd tier or higher, and you've probably been doing yin yoga a while. So if I were to say to you, start out in a supported bridge, then take it to a half butterfly on each side, half butterfly, then go into a dragon pose, or if that's bad for your knees, if you have a knee issue, a half happy baby upside down, and then finally either a reclined pigeon or a sleeping swan. Sleeping swan. So that's my little homework for you tonight. And keep in mind too that external rotation feels completely different on your dominant side than it does your non-dominant side. And it's one of those things that maybe you notice a little bit of difference in a non-dominant, mid-back or thigh, but it's something you really, really notice in your hips because you always lead with the dominant leg, right? If you ever want to know what your dominant leg is, you do the fall test. So I don't know if you can get me all in this, probably not, but you stand and start to fall forward, and the foot that moves forward first is your dominant foot. There's your fun fact for the day. And if I cut off my head on that, I'm so sorry. I have my fancy new vlogging kit from my friend Talia. So for right now, folks, namaste. I'll see you in the next clip.